certified.
What's going on, y'all? This is Huggie Pacino. Look, I want to speak about Scheme and Sonetta because I actually was watching the Sonetta interview where Scheme was on there. Scheme being a member of the Brim Bloods in New York. We pretty much are familiar with, his background, what he speaks about, who he talks about, and what he talks about. One day he's on his live and he's looking through the chat, live on the air, and this child screams. Now, I assume that maybe the child is autistic. The child could be child could be, it could be something, wrong with the child. The child could be sick. The child could be in pain. It could be anything that made this child scream. But out of Scheme's mouth, he said he always doing all that screaming and hollering and shit for nothing. Like, yo, that child is suffering. Something is wrong with that child. If I'm under the impression, I'm assuming the child could be maybe 2, 3, maybe 4 years old. He obviously is not, probably isn't old enough to really rationalize with, what's going on. He's probably younger. He's probably too young to realize what's wrong with him. He's probably just suffering and doesn't know how to really say much because he pretty much didn't say anything. He just screamed. Like, he didn't say leave me alone. He didn't say stop. He just screamed. And I want to speak about how a lot of things that we go through as kids go undiagnosed. We don't get diagnosis of what happens to us. A lot of us don't get checked out, and a lot of things go unnoticed. I want to also say that Scheme is filed for that, and their justification is, oh, that's my cousin, hey, my grandmother would have did this, and this is how I was raised, and blah blah blah. Listen, let me tell you, I got my ass whooped with switches, extension cords, I got punched, I got all that shit. However, I want to preach something that my dad talked about, and we had to talk about this a few years ago. Cause my dad used to whip my ass too, and he told me that when you think about slavery and black people, remember when we used to get out of line, and the story goes, when we used to get out of line and we do anything wrong, Master would whoop us with a whip. They would beat us. It was a way of getting us in line. And that particular tradition has been passed down through the black family, that physically assaulting or physically beating someone, a human being, a child, a teenager, leads to discipline. Now, I for one, I don't knock people who whoop their children. I just think it's certain ways you need to handle the shit. First of all, it don't need to be done online. If you're gonna do that shit, turn the camera off. Go on mute. Whatever you do in the privacy of your home, if you want to abuse your kid, don't do it in the public where people can hear it, because now we have a public opinion about it. And then you can't get upset about people's public opinion. That's not disciplining that child. What you doing was not disciplinary whatsoever. You yelled, you cursed, there was no respect for that child in your voice. Now, you might not give a damn about that. You might look at me like I'm clout chasing or whatever, but I'm just keeping it real because I give a damn about children. I'm gonna say that. I'm also gonna say this. That child don't need to be in their home because the mother condoned the same thing that you were doing. She was pretty much condoning it. And she was telling them now she wasn't aggressive like you were. And I give her credit for that. But it seems like she deals with this on a daily, and this is a regular routine. So she's like, be quiet, stop it, stop yelling, and then you covering up his mouth. That's not cool. For that child's sake, that's not cool. And it's not cool to hear, even if it was 20 years ago. I think there's certain ways you handle disciplining your children. I think it needs to be done a certain way. I, for one, don't agree with disciplining children physically, because how are you going to raise a kid? And trust me, listen, people say it all the time. Well, I got my whoopings and look at how it made me. Well, a lot of single mothers are raising boys all by themselves. And most of them are successful grown men who do become adults, and they become successful in adulthood. But if they fail, do you then look and say, well, I didn't have a father for my kid? It's the same thing with this whole thing about disciplining your child. Do you understand that Chris Brown, for example, was abused as a kid? He saw his dad abuse his mom. He got physically abused. So then he goes into the real world. We don't give him that same pass for beating on Rihanna, being physically aggressive toward women. We don't give him that same pass. But remember, when you teach violence, you pass down violence. And I don't care what no one says. When you physically assault, you physically harm child or children, you teach them that violence is the answer. If I discipline you, you will do right. That's the psychology behind it. Now, people can beg to differ, but if I'm beating my 14-year-old kid and I'm beating him with a wooden fucking piece or a plank or an object, and I'm telling him, shut up, do right, this, that, and the third, if he goes become an adult and he's 25, 11 years later, right? He's gonna feel like, if I beat this person, they're gonna do right. You don't start thinking, well, I got beat, so what's good for me is good for you. Now, let's just remove the adult idea. He has a kid. He's gonna raise his kid the same way? Nah, because I got my whoopings. I went through all that shit. And how I don't want to raise my kid, I don't be raising my kid to be beating them. Because if you was a better parent, you was putting shit in order, you wouldn't have to beat your kids in the first place. In most cases, a lot of people get out of hand. They get the shit out of hand to the point where now you do feel like there's no option. Let's beat them. Maybe that will help. In most cases, that shit does make it worse. Like, you have people out here who get these whoopings and they go into the real world and then they have to face society. And that's, because that's just how I feel about discipline and, physically, beating your kid. I just think that it could work, but when you think about the psyche of people, you don't want to be physically, beating your kid, and then next thing you know, you take that into the real world and they think that, oh, well, this is what happened to you. All right. All right, you have a good day, huh? All right. I was just fussing on my bed. I'm not this shit over, man. Hey, how you doing? Okay. All right. Well, that's how I feel about, abuse and everything. Need your thoughts. I just think that when it comes down to physically whooping your children, it's passed down of slavery. And me and my dad, like I said, we talked about that. And he really thought that we are passing down slavery to this generation after generation after generation. And there needs to be structure. We need to go back to structure where there was a male and female, family, being, male and female raising the family, which goes back to feminism, the feminist movement, so to speak, welfare and everything in between. When you start pacifying mothers, and then now they became single mothers to the point where they push the man out the home. That's the only way this is going to get solved in the first place. We need men in place. If you don't feel like, and as a woman, I'm going to speak for single mothers out there. If you feel like men don't need to be in place, then hey, we don't want to hear about how hard it is being a single mother when you feel like a man ain't needed. When you feel like you don't need a man, hey, stand by it. It ain't hard, is it? You don't feel like you need no man. You know, that's a whole other video. I'll get into that another day, but I want to speak about that because that is one of the problems. Yeah, because if that boy stays in the home, what's gonna happen is he's gonna end up like him. And you can tell he probably's been growing up in a home with dysfunctional behavior. Like this is a never-ending cycle, and sometimes you gotta break the cycle. That's all I'm saying. I can go on and on and on, but tell me what y'all think. Leave your comments in below and let me know what y'all think.
Now that's Huggie Pacino certified.
Chicken and corn.
He wants something to eat. I live for this shit.
Why you stay a business, boy?